Welcome to the Week in IndyCar on the Marshall Pruett podcast, presented by Cooper Tires. Boy, we have a packed show to get through here, coming off of last weekend's IndyCar Series season finale at Sonoma Raceway. Championship claimed by Scott Dixon, now IndyCar's only 5-time winner. He was among a group of, holy cow, 4-time winners. Now only AJ Foyt is ahead of him as a 7-time winner. Got Dixie on here, had him for about 15 minutes or so. Was just finally catching a flight from the East Coast to head home. And caught up with Dixie there. Then also spoke with young Patricio O'Ward, I would say the breakout star last weekend of the Sonoma season finale. Spoke with him on Monday. He was having to fly to New York on Tuesday for announcements that hopefully you've read by now about the Harding-Steinbrenner Racing Team, something we have done our best to keep a lid on here for more than a month, but exciting news there. So when we spoke about it on Monday with Pato, we weren't exactly sure when this was going to go up, and so we didn't get into it too heavily, but I'll talk about it here in just a moment. And then we also have our friend Katie Hargitt from NBCSN IndyCar and NBCSN, and broke down some of the events from last weekend and also plenty of listener questions. Had about 10 or 15 with Scott Dixon and mentioned that when I asked for questions. We got about 40, so we weren't able to get through, nearly as many as I'd hoped, but Dixie did his best, and Pato also got through quite a few, and then Katie and I closed up by rifling through as many as we could there. Katie, who we started speaking while she was driving to the airport in Sacramento, and then we had a few too many dropouts, so we said, all right, let's just wait till you get through TSA, get to your gate, and then we will finish the rest of the call there. So, I tell you, I've mentioned this a couple times already, but not exactly ready for the IndyCar season to be over. It's just a really fascinating one. A lot of dynamics at play. Young stars breaking out like Pato to close things. Robert Wickens shocking everybody from race 1. Alexander Rossi showing everybody that whenever Dixie is ready to hang it up, he is more than prepared to carry on in his place as the standard bearer. Fascinating weekend, too, in terms of how things played out. We had testing the week prior on Thursday, where Team Penske, the Rahal program, and also Harding with Pato were there running. And then this most recent Thursday, the day before official practice, we had the Ganassi team, the Andretti cars, and a number of others testing. Really thought what Penske learned during their test was going to help them continue their dominance at Sonoma Raceway. Really didn't happen. What was the interesting surprise was Ryan Hunter-Reay, who was very quick in testing, very quick on Friday in practice, then came through, got the pole from Dixon, and frankly was never seriously challenged for the win. Really happy for him, really happy for that Andretti team. Also a bit surprised to see when they really needed to rise to the challenge, really needed to pull out something special on Rossi's side, just wasn't quite there. And that's not a criticism. It's just we've seen them do that multiple times this year. Pull off some amazing laps, whether it was for pole, some crazy, crazy passes that no one else could do. Is really making bold statements at so many tracks. From a strategy standpoint, definitely from Alexander's efforts behind the wheel. Just a bit strange to see a kind of boring mistake made to start the race. Hitting his teammate Marco Andretti from behind, bashing his front wings, flattening his right front tire. Just strange. I'm not saying I would expect perfection from Alexander here at the end of his third season, but looking at the body of work that got him into title contention, I probably share your thoughts about, that's too bad. Was really hoping for a gripping Rossi versus Dixon battle down to the wire, and although Alexander did charge back in the latter stages of the race, it wasn't that throwdown type thing I think many of us were hoping for. I'm trying to think of some other things that are definitely stood out from the event. So being there, I got to see the whole thing, as did everyone else who was there. And as we quickly learned, those who weren't there, those who were relying on televised images, were rather frustrated that the endless yellow-white checker, no possible end in sight until we get that done NASCAR routine, well, it pushed their broadcast window late. And as I understand it, I'm not claiming to have done all the super investigation, but as I understand it, there are a lot of folks who tuned in to NBCSN expecting to see a pre-race show and didn't see that there. And for those who just tuned straight in expecting for the race to kick off, didn't find that, found NASCAR with their top series under a yellow or a red or whatever it was instead of the start of the race. I believe what happened was that kicked everything over to CNBC from a pre-race standpoint and the start of the race standpoint. So for those who have experienced this in the past, you might have known to dive over to CNBC as the preferred option whenever things run late or just an extra resource is required. And I believe there was some cutting in while they were under red in the NASCAR race to try and get some of the early laps in, not the start. But bottom line, definitely have felt and read the frustration from many IndyCar fans who tuned in to NBCSN expecting to see things kick off, this big season finale you've been hoping for, the culmination of a full season's work, and you've got a bunch of parked taxi cabs. So, I hear you. I'm not exactly sure how the information gets disseminated on, hey, there's a pause, and so on and so forth. Go to another channel. Well, we've had to make this immediate change of things and so on. But yeah, it definitely appears that some folks were not very happy. And I guess from my end, as someone who did get to see it, I felt a little guilty, so I'm sorry. So anyways, move on from that. What else stood out that we might get into before we dive into a sequence of Scott Dixon, then Pato, and then close with Katie and I? Clive Howell, Team Penske's team manager for the past 300 years, decided to retire. I'm hoping to do a little more of an in-depth story on that soon, but Clive has just been an integral part of that organization for a long, long time. And I mean, he is not a large guy from stature standpoint, but in terms of impact and importance and influence, boy, that guy has just been absolutely on fire. A nuclear-propelled force within that team, takes no guff, is not someone who you hear just readily laughing and taking things lightly, and I would say that Clive's absolute dedication to that team's perfection and excellence, on top of a Roger Penske, obviously decades later Tim Cindric showing up, he's been one of the through lines of someone that has made the Penske way what it is and made sure that that has been adhered to all along. Let's see, what else? Well, did speak a little bit about the Andretti Junior team / Steinbrenner Harding Racing. Good on them. We've known about that for a while, as I mentioned. What we haven't known exactly is how this would shake out on the Gabby Chavez end. We were hoping, truly hoping, that knowing we had two Harding Steinbrenner cars coming for Colton and for Pato, that there would be a, call it a third car, a Harding only, just like we've had since they made their debut. Just strictly Mike, his car for Pato. We were hoping to hear that that would go forward. Was told over the weekend that no, that actually is not the plan at all. And so I don't know, I can't say with absolute confidence where that leaves Gabby. Would I be surprised if we learned here in the coming weeks or months that he is a free agent and the remainder of his contract, which extended through 2019, was bought out? No, not at all. Would I be surprised to see someone hire Gabby for the Indy 500 next year and or some of the other ovals? Also, not at all. Incredibly good there. He's also had some good road course races too, but hard to dance around the fact that he is one of the main folks who is going to be cast aside, we believe, as a result of this new Andretti Harding Steinbrenner angle. Have heard, could there be a Harding only or non-Steinbrenner Harding entry at the Indy 500? Also heard that that's very unlikely. Wouldn't say impossible, but that it's very unlikely, and there's a desire to focus on this new Andretti Junior Team program without adding in any extra layers of distraction there. So see what plays out officially here. But yeah, I think Gabby, unfortunately, is going to be searching for a new home if he wants to continue racing. If we're talking about bad luck, I definitely brought that upon Zach Veach. Might have heard me talk about how a couple weeks ago on our week in IndyCar that one of the listener questions came in from Daniel Ferris, asked us which superpower would we choose, who would our superhero sidekick be, and I said my power would be flight. Always a Superman fan, and my big fat butt flying through the air. I can't think of any sidekicks that would want to join me, so I chose our cat Rocky, and carrying him in a pink basket just to sell how lame of a superhero I would be. Zach, of course, in an epic fail, said, if anybody makes that sticker, I will put that on my helmet and wear it throughout the Sonoma weekend. Our friends at Toronto Motorsport did exactly that. Roger Warwick drew it. Hilarious. Showed up the day before I drove up and told Zach about it and did a fun little video with Sonoma Raceway. And I'll tell you that although he showed great promise, his race ended up not being all that fun. And so I think this was definitely the curse of me, and a sticker cartoon of my fat behind on his helmet must have been the thing that unwound a good result for him. I'll also say, and this is just a thank you to you all, this is all thanks to the podcast and you guys. Your questions that come in, some of them are serious, some of them are funny. Zach, being a lighthearted guy, took this and ran with it on his own, and I still think it's pretty darn cool to realize that from a question sent in by a listener, which was answered by an IndyCar driver who loved it and said, if someone makes that into a sticker, I'll put it on my helmet, to someone making that sticker and him putting it on his helmet and wearing it throughout the weekend. I don't know. I just think it's kind of cool. I'm not saying that's going to happen all the time, but yeah, just cool to know that because of you all, because of Daniel specifically who sent that in, able to have a little bit of podcast influence on one IndyCar driver. All right, before we get into Scott Dixon, I guess I should mention that there was actually a listener question, which we'll see if it pays off. But yeah, there was a question asked as to whether he would do something if he wins his 6th championship, and he said yes. So there's a potential. It's not a sticker. It might actually be even more embarrassing, but Dixie did say yes to this. So if he does win a 6th championship, yeah, the old podcast might actually be hanging another person out to dry. So we'll see there. What else can we get into quickly before we get rolling? Let's close on this. And it's just the trying to share some things in the podcast that don't always fit perfectly on the printed page, or the printed web page, I should say, on racer.com. There was definitely an undercurrent last weekend in Sonoma, and it had been bubbling up for a while. It seemed like it really bubbled up heavily last weekend. And that's coming back to the Andretti Junior Team. How does Michael Andretti run 4 cars with Honda power and then 2 with Chevy power for Pato and Colton? How does that work? Should that even be allowed? One overarching entity being able to use both engines and, in theory, have information on everything. How the Chevy engine works, its strengths, its weaknesses, possibly then helping their Honda-powered team, possibly passing that on to Honda. All kinds of things where if you wanted to run with that concept, you could come up with all kind of evil-hearted, dark intents and such. I'm not saying that I believe Andretti would do that and would be running in that direction, but I can say for sure that I heard my colleague Robin Miller, and I'm sure other reporters as well, heard that there were quite a few very powerful and influential people in the IndyCar paddock raising some big questions on that topic. How this shouldn't be illegal. This should not be legal. You should not allow this to happen. Expressing that to IndyCar. Maybe that's a great question for y'all to weigh in with and share with me either on our Marshall Pruett Podcast Facebook page, which I would urge you to join, or on Twitter, and just let me know what you think. There's some... It might be hard to fully police such a thing, separating the Chevy-powered side of the Andretti, Harding, Steinbrenner effort and the full Honda 4-car Andretti Autosport program there with the Japanese manufacturer. I do know that, at least for those on the Chevy side, it seems like there was some pretty serious concerns, this being a year where Honda stood out, won the Manufacturers' Championship, didn't win the Indy 500, but won more races and definitely appeared to have a bit of an advantage. That's maybe another angle too. Be one thing if Chevy dominated this season and Michael Andretti could in theory then say, hey, we've now got Chevy powered cars and boy, we're going to unlock all the secrets and pass them on to Honda, or quantify those things to make our Honda team stronger at least. And that wasn't the case. Not saying that Chevy doesn't have some pretty amazing things that they do or that could be learned and applied somehow to the Honda side of Andretti's empire, or maybe even passed on to Honda themselves. But I knowing the character of many of the folks involved, I think they would be more concerned about even the perception of impropriety than really, saying, hey, yeah, give me that, that secret little USB stick that has all the secret information, and boy, we're going to know all kinds of top secret things. That might sound naive, maybe it is, but I do know that although it sounds easy on the surface, intellectual property, theft of intellectual property, and so on, it's a big, 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 big thing. Even at this level, with two engine manufacturers, two automotive brands involved, I can guarantee you that before this Harding-Steinbrenner thing went forward with Chevy, a lot of conversations, and I'm making assumptions, but I'm fairly confident they are accurate. There are some pretty clear guidelines laid out internally on go and no-go areas and how one another's data would be protected, etc., etc. So this is not just as simple as the Andretti, Steinbrenner, Harding folks saying, hey, we're going to use Chevy, and Chevy going, cool, you bet, and hey, we're not going to put any thought or any layers of protection on either end into this. Guarantee you that has happened. The mechanisms, I can't speak to that. I don't know. But I can tell you that there are other teams in the paddock that either believe this shouldn't be allowed or want to know from IndyCar how they are going to make sure that one team does not have a monopoly on all information that they can use to beat Honda and Chevy teams, because they're the only one straddling both sides of the fence. So, yeah, that was the undercurrent. That was the main undercurrent last weekend. Of course, nobody wanted to speak on the record. Everyone had an opinion, but no one wanted to speak on the record, so that makes it a perfect little podcast thing to discuss here. All right, time to get to my favorite question from last week's episode. That's our final little point here, which we do every week thanks to our friends at TorontoMotorsports.com. I'm actually going to choose one we didn't get to, and that's because I'm looking back at this and realizing, holy cow, Ryan Terpstra, in hindsight, you were brilliant, and in hindsight, I was an idiot for not getting this into the show. So we're actually going to give out my favorite question for one that we didn't use, but it's my fault that I didn't. Ryan said, what is the contingency plan for NASCAR running long on Sunday? I know the NASCAR lead-in helps IndyCar ratings, but the window seems very small. I would hate for the championship to get bumped to CNBC. Ryan, first of all, can I please borrow your time machine? Because you can see into the future. Yeah, so everything we discussed just a little while ago played out, and I did actually read your question while we were scanning through them last week. I just ran out of time to get to it, so it's not as if I didn't enjoy all the other questions, just, yeah, I got to give props to somebody here who really was trying to point us towards a concern that should have been spelled out in bigger words beforehand. So, Ryan, shoot me a little DM, give me your preferred t-shirt size and an address, and our friends at TorontoMotorsports.com will get you one of our new Week in IndyCar t-shirts headed your way. All right. It's time for Dixie. It's time for our man Dix. And then Pato O'Ward, and then Katie Hargitt. And then we're going to put this episode to bed, and we're going to come back next week and have plenty more to talk about. Dix, congratulations on title number 5. Kind of ridiculous, man. I mean, 5. You filled up one hand with rings. I guess now you got to fill up the other. What's this last day or two been like for you? And B, have you sobered up yet?
Yeah, no, we didn't hit it too hard. It was, I find like these days, man, you end up having a lot of commitments that you don't get too much time for the beverage situation. But no, we had a few after, on Sunday night, but it was just at the hotel with, close friends and that kind of stuff, and or at least people that were just staying at the same hotel as us. So it was a good time, and yeah, this one's special. I think, I don't know, five, sounds way better than 4, of course, even though it's only a difference of 1, but it definitely sounds a whole lot different to me. But yeah, it was, I think for us, holding on to the championship lead for so long, I think it's kind of nerve-wracking, and you definitely don't want to lose it coming down to the last race, and I think that's what made, definitely the last 2 or 3 races, probably the most stressful, I think, throughout all the championships that we've raced for.
Before we get into listener questions, and we got about 15 minutes or so here before you got to hop on a flight, and we've gotten 33 questions, so I apologize. We're not going to be able to get to half of them, but let's talk about pressure quickly, Dix, before we get to listener questions. Watching you and the team in the final practice session before qualifying, I don't know if a message was being sent or if you guys are really on top of your game, but it was a 45-minute session, and I stood in your pit box for most of it, and you just sat in the car for the first 15 minutes of that session, watching the big video board, looking at timing and scoring, went out, did a couple runs, made some spring changes, got a feel for the car on a new set of blacks, but that was in comparison to the Andretti team, the Penske team, and others who were out there just pounding around the whole time. It seemed like you guys were just chill. Was that putting a mask over things? Because you talk about pressure, I didn't see it demonstrated in any way.
No, there was definitely pressure. A lot of pressure. I think at that point we'd had the additional test day on the Thursday, right? So we'd had several hours running around the track. I think that the biggest thing for us was that, and all of it is mostly done in preparation before you get to the track, and we had made a pretty big wholesale change to, how we normally run at Sonoma, how we normally run at road courses. We'd had, a bit of a sticking issue throughout the year where qualifying it didn't run smoothly for us on most of the road courses, so we had fast cars, but when it came down to it, you really had to push it. It kind of backfired a little bit. So, we came with a totally different car. It rolled off really well. It was good correlation between, simulation, shaker rig, and aero. So, that was nice. I think when we first rolled off, we didn't even bother, really tuning up with, what we had last year. So that was a nice sign. And at that point, we were kind of really just chasing, track conditions, and we knew we would have to, from morning to afternoon, track temp was, 30, 40 degrees difference. The ambient was a lot different. The wind direction was different. So it was just, not trying to run down a rabbit hole too far. That we dial ourselves out.
All right, let's jump into some questions, Dix, before you got to fly home finally. Jameen Tuttle says, Scott, you've won championships during multiple versions and eras of IndyCar. Was one more difficult or rewarding than the others? And that's a great point, brother. From kind of the kart/champ car era through the truly spec IndyCar era to this DW12 era, you've been floating with those championships in a lot of different spans.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I don't know. I find how you achieve a championship, they're all very different, right? The end result's the same, but if you look at the first one in 2003, it was all ovals. I think I DNF'd 6 races that year. So attrition was a big deal. This year I think we nearly finished just about every lap, throughout the year, and only 3 wins opposed to, some years we had 6. So I don't know. I find the modern day ones are actually really, really tough, just because the competition is so tight. There's no small teams. We used to have the big team, small team, and there used to be a lot of difference, and updates and development and things like that. There's not a lot you can do to the cars. The dampers are kind of really the only open thing that we can adjust, and then everybody else really has the same settings. So and even the small teams now they're not really small teams. They got good budgets, they got great engineering, they've got really good drivers. So I'd say, the modern day ones for me, no matter what the car is, the tougher ones to win.
Wow. I would say this year, just looking at the numbers, Dix, I mean, you only had 2 finishes outside the top 10. You finished everything. I mean, yeah. Pretty remarkable when your 5th championship, at least in my opinion, is the one where you put in your strongest body of work to get it. So that
you have to.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to now. You have to.
Not too bad, my man. We've got a couple people who've asked this question in some form or the other, and I guess it's pivoting off of winning your 5th championship, you greedy bastard. Is there anything in motorsports that you still want to achieve? Maybe in another series, Bathurst 1000 win, etc. It's not as if you're giving up IndyCar, my man, but are there other big-ticket items you're like, okay, I'd like to go for that sometime too?
Yeah, of course. I think there's always, Bathurst is one. I think I'd probably prefer to do, Bathurst 12-hour, like in the GT spec. It'd be very hard to just, dive into, the supercar forum and try and turn up and compete well in that. So, yeah, I'd like to do that in stages, whether that ever opens opportunity for, the Bathurst 1000, we'll have to see. Le Mans, is still, it's a race I've done. We finished on the podium in the first year. The team won it, but, I haven't been in a car that, winning that outright would be tremendous, but prototype is also very tough. Maybe an Xfinity race, I'd love to do a road course, or, so there's definitely other things I'd love to do. But reality is not always the easiest situation to try and pull off. These I find the cross platforms now are quite difficult, to achieve one, schedules, but also sponsors, and, there's always lots of things that make it difficult. But having said that, I think Alonso has, opened up a lot of eyes in the fact that, you can kind of switch around a little bit. And, he's done a very good job. It's not an easy thing. He's a huge talent and one of few that I think would be able to pull it off. But, one day I hope to try a few different things. Amen.
Thomas Gross has a question about the race. He said, Dixie, how does your mindset change when you knew or learned Rossi was in trouble? He says, I know you wouldn't take your foot off the gas, but do you allow yourself to settle in to second at that point and not risk, trying to get to the absolute front? Curious how Alexander's first lap issues did or didn't play into your mindset or strategy.
Yeah, I think in other formulas, it would make you maybe worry less about whoever your closest rival was and for Rossi. But, I think we know in IndyCar, typically when there's a crash in the first lap, that person has to change a front wing. They normally get a drive-through penalty. The list goes on, and then that person comes through and wins the race. So that made, that for me was thinking, okay, they're probably going to be way off strategy, now to try and get back in the race. If you have a lucky caution or a caution falls their way, much to, what we did have happen to us in Portland, and, that was probably, I think, the biggest thing we were worried about, which is, highly probable in our style of racing. So, to get to the last stop and be full to finish, was definitely a sigh of relief. But, Rossi did a hell of a job coming back through the field too, and was challenging hard at the end there. So, you're never out until, the last lap, and it's, you get past that start-finish line and you get the checkered flag. So, yeah, we were definitely concerned. Did it change our style of race? Hunter Ray was going to race hard, one for his teammate, but secondly, he all he wanted to do was win that race.
Sure.
So, there was a lot more on the line for us. So, yeah, I wouldn't say we settled for second, but that was probably the wiser choice.
We always have some fun questions that come in from our listeners, Dix, as you know. Let's start off with Tom Cottle, who says, ask Scott if you got Taco Bell after the race and ate it in front of Brian Herta. So what was your post-race celebration meal, my man?
I think I had pizza. I think by the time we got back to the hotel, that's all they were. Yeah, I had pizza and French fries. Dario had a big burger, and then of course a side of about 5 beers. So it was no Taco Bell. Trust me, that's probably my last meal. It's it's a favorite of mine, and we go to all ends, even getting held up by at gunpoint to get Taco Bell, but. No Taco Bell. I'll be getting it sometime this week, though.
I love that on your deathbed, you're making a run for the border. That's the best.
That's right, man. That's right.
All right, couple more here. Keith Lee, another thanks, man. He says, congrats, Dixie, on your 5th championship. He says, when you win your 6th, can you dye your hair blonde again, circa 2001? Ooh, come on, man. Let's commit to that now.
I know. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I'll happily do that. I actually just got an email from Rocky, who was my engineer, and that was our kind of like little bet between us, and he dyed his hair, or bleached it, I guess. You bleach it, you don't dye it. But, yeah, he's, long gone now too, and is working for Red Bull and in Formula One. But, yeah, that was, I remember that one freshly, and I see, pictures here and there of that era where I had, bleached blonde hair.
I'm sure that's the first thing Emma ever saw of you and said, I must have that man. All right.
Yeah, I don't think so. It's the opposite to that.
I think we know the answer to this one, but I'll ask it anyways because it is pretty cool. John Hankins says, does Scott ever have conversations about records with either Mario or AJ Foyt, either you asking them or them maybe just bringing up your achievements so far in the sport?
No, like I've had many conversations with Mario and AJ, and that's one of the very cool things about our sport is that that these guys are still coming to every race. They legends of the sport and are so immersed in it. And so there's very few sports like that. So and Michael for instance too. So no, I don't really talk to them about anything like that. It's more about the cars and the races that they had and. Different stories here and there, and mostly with AJ, it's actually stories away from the track opposed to the racing. So, I love chatting with those guys. Just that era. I think a lot of us wish we were able to be present and racing in that era, just with the technology shift and the antics that you could kind of get away with back then. And these days, man, you can't do any of that. So it's always fun to see them and obviously, honor what they added to the sport and continue to do to this day.
Well, I've always been fond of you dirty Kiwis, so I got a couple of great questions here. Shay Small says, Scott, did you have Kenny Smith, Colin Giltrap, or anyone else from New Zealand who helped you in your IndyCar career help you to celebrate your 5th championship in person? And then we had a second question. I'm sorry, I'm scrolling up trying to find this, but someone asking, since the All Blacks didn't exactly have the best, most recent result, did you feel any extra pressure to help lift up your beloved country?
No, I guess it worked out well. Well, for me, obviously not for the All Blacks. No, I think they had a pretty rough go. So hopefully that at least cheered up a couple of Kiwis. And no, I didn't. Colin Giltrap wasn't over. PJ, a few of those guys have come to the 500 this year. Actually, Colin's son Richard had been there. He brought his son as well. Kenny was over recently, right? At the historic race for the Formula 5000s. Which is crazy, man. The guy's still racing at the age of 77, and I think he qualified, in the top 5.
Yeah.
I have spoken to Kenny numerous times, and we'll see him actually in about 3 weeks when I get back down to New Zealand. So, yeah, I definitely keep in close contact with a lot of those people, and most of the investors that set up Scott Dixon Motorsports, the investment group early on. So look forward to catching up with them.
I'm going to say the last question here because it gives us the opportunity to get the knives out. Daniel Kincaid says, how does it feel to have more championships than Alligator Arms Dario Franchitti?
Alligator Arms. He must know Dario well. He's always looking for that wallet. He's actually got better in his old age, and I don't know if that's maybe after he's hit his head a few times. But no, he's got an easy comeback on that one. Unfortunately, with 3 Indy 500 victories. So I said to him, Indy 500s are maybe worth 2 championships. So he's at a total of 10. I'm only halfway there, but No, we have lots of banter. I love Dario. He's, one of my best friends, and it was cool to have him actually most of the weekend on the number 9 timing stand, which was really cool, and he's a lot of fun to work with. I don't get to work with him intensely very often, throughout the season, but it was really cool. He was actually my daily driver to the track too. My wife had taken my car, so he was my Uber man. So I had a pretty good Uber driver.
Well, how many stars did you give him?
I'm still working on that.
Yeah.
He didn't have my coffee. He was kind of driving all over the road and stuff. So, he maybe get a 2 or 3 out of that one.
See, another career comes to a close for that guy. Dix,
sure.
you know how much I appreciate you and how awesome it's been to watch you make history here in this sport. And I know you're not someone who dwells on that stuff, but for those who don't know you, you've always been someone that outside of what you do in the race car, you've always been the model citizen in the paddock, the first guy there to help somebody when they need it. So when you have a new champion who's not only the best of his era, but also just a damn fine human being, we're pretty fortunate in IndyCar to have you, man. So thanks again for not only sharing some time here, but also for making our little world a lot better.
Thanks, man. It's very kind of you. And I love the sport. I love being able to do what I do. I feel very lucky and very privileged. So I'm going to always give it my all. But thank you for what you guys do, man. And it's always fun chatting. And I'll see you soon, man. See you soon.
Absolutely. Petite, here we come. Young Patricio O'Ward. If you were trying to keep quiet, play in the background, and do the anonymous thing last weekend, you kind of messed up. You kind of let the world know you got some big things ahead of you, my man. I guess with a day, maybe, heck, we're not even a full day away from your IndyCar debut. How are you feeling about your performance? How are you feeling physically? What's going on?
I'm feeling good, man. I got to, sit down and think about the weekend last night, and I think it was really, really good. I saw the names in front of me, and everybody in front of me is really, really good and very well known. So I think for me to end in a top 10 finish with together with them was something really cool. Obviously, I got to race them on track for the first time, and I got to battle with some people on track as well, which was something that throughout the race I had to learn a lot of things. I didn't pass anybody in practice, so it took me a while to learn how to get around someone in this new IndyCar for me. But I think once I got around one person, I kind of got the hang of it, and then I started passing. I mean, I got shuffled back to like 18th, and then made my way back up to 9th. So I'm very, very proud of what I could accomplish in, you know, such a short amount of time, knowing the car, knowing the people, knowing, you know, just the race, just an ordinary race of IndyCar, which is so different to what I'm used to. But it was something, you know, I'm very, very happy about the weekend. My objective was a fast 6. Obviously, it was an optimistic expectation, but
sure.
I accomplished it, and I wanted to stay in the top 10, and I did. So I'm really pleased, and physically, I'm going to be doing a lot of more lifting in the off season.
Yeah, you're going to be looking like frickin' Hunter Ray by the time you come back, so I knew that was going to be a plan.
Yeah, no, for sure. The car is really physical, especially around Sonoma. But I think I held on really well. I didn't make any mistakes. I made one little mistake whenever I was basically dying on track with those reds in the first stint. But after that, I managed it very well, and I was putting down some really, really quick lap times. I was right on pace with Newgarden, so I'm very, very happy.
So before we get into the race a little bit, we got a bunch of great questions too we're going to jump into here momentarily. Give us an impression of what it was like now that you have the weekend in the rearview mirror of going through, I don't know, a normal Indy Lights weekend and the amount of attention you get there from media or from fans. There's some, but we both know it's not a lot. It's a feeder series. It's not the top marquee show. What was it like being a part of the big show and then standing out in the big show? What was it like getting a whole new level of spotlight placed on you?
It was, I think the right word would be hectic. You know, not only I think outside of the car, but I think the race was hectic for me as well, especially in the beginning. But there's a lot more media obligations that I had to go through. There was just a lot more attention on me. There was a lot more people, looking at my performances, looking at what I was going to do, either it was qualifying or race.
A lot of selfies, a lot of folks wanting photos and autographs that I saw. It seemed like, you went from being able to walk through a paddock a month ago without anybody, really bothering you a whole bunch to it seemed like you had a lot of folks who certainly knew you were there all of a sudden. Yeah,
I was very surprised. I think my qualifying helped on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a lot of people, and there were some awesome fans in Sonoma, and I'm really excited to get a chance to get another go in an IndyCar race and see what they're like in other events. I'm sure they're awesome as well. But it was something new, but it was cool to talk to new people, and a lot of people were saying very nice things to me. So that was very, I guess, special. And I think that's what it's all about. We're all there to give them a nice show, and it's nice when they can, they can tell you and, basically, give you their opinion on how things are going. And it's, something like you said, it's new. There's a lot more people, and it's like getting thrown up onto a stage, and then the lights on you, and then they're just waiting to see what you're going to do.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to hear people are saying good things. That at least counterbalances a little bit all the mean stuff Miller and I say to you. So that's good to hear that there's a little bit of correction going on. Let's see, what else comes to mind? Well, in the race itself, Pato, it really seemed like, boy, if we're talking about 85 laps of education for your first time out in an IndyCar, man, it seemed like you got everything a professor might throw at you, right? Great starting position, fell back a little bit, could see that you were driving the car really hard, really sharp inputs on the steering wheel on turn-in. The rear of the car started to give up fast, a bit fast as a result. You're having to deal with tires that have said, all right, we're done. Yet your engineer, Mark Bryan, say, nope, you're not done though, kid. You need to give me some more laps. You went to the back, went to the front. It seems like a day where, just from an educational standpoint, instead of it being all one direction, you kind of went every direction. You feel like you swallowed about as much as you could in terms of first-time IndyCar experience?
I think I did, but you know what? I'm really, really grateful that happened to me, because when I get that go again, I know the speed is there. I know I have the speed to get poles. I know I have the speed to start on the front. I just have to get the knowledge of the racing down. And once I get that down, I know I'm going to be able to start winning races and getting some good podiums. So I feel like when I get another go at it, I feel like I'm going to be way, way stronger. I think it's just a little hard in the beginning, because you don't know what to expect and everything is just so new. But once I went through it once, I know what to expect from the tire. I know what to expect from the pit stops. I know what to expect from all the drivers. And I thought the racing was really good. In a way it was aggressive, but in another way it was very professional. And that's why I guess we're, obviously there's the occasional one that you say, oh my God, but usually all of them were good, and everybody, whenever I would launch or they would launch on me, I would respect them, and they respected me as well. So I thought that was awesome, and I definitely learned. I think I learned more than I've ever learned before in a race. It was a very long race, but it was like someone at the end of the race, it was like someone grabbed some, a group of ideas or a group of memories and shoved it into my brain. and now I have so much more knowledge about it. And I'm excited to get back in it again, because I feel like I'm going to do very well. And it was awesome, man. I really, really enjoyed it. I remember my last stint yesterday. I know I had Jones behind me, but I was taking care of my tires, and which I did, and I was putting down some good lap times, and just started learning how to fuel save and all those types of things. And I was just enjoying the race car, enjoying driving around Sonoma for the last 10-15 laps of the race. And it was very, very enjoyable, very, very.
I mean, you finished directly behind the 2017 Verizon IndyCar Series champion Joseph Newgarden in your debut. That's pretty darn magical, my man. And I think, look, as I've told folks many times on my podcast, while I am a professional reporter and writer and do many things, and while my podcasts are professional-ish, it's also a little more personal. I will share personal opinions here that I wouldn't necessarily put in print, because there is kind of a line of professionalism to not cross. But it's no joke that I am and many others are fond of what you're doing. And you're a horrible human being. We've already said that, but we're fond of the talent that we see, at least. But no, kidding aside, many of us are always going to be rooting for the Indy Lights champ coming into IndyCar, seeing them do well. And when you were able to do that, or Ed Jones when he came in as champ, Spencer Pigot, we can name so many. It gives so many of us hope. And then when you turn up and make the Fast Six your first time out, it's like, holy cow, I'm getting texts and calls from friends much older than I am, folks who've won Le Mans and done this and that and have had huge careers, who are saying, oh, now I get what you and some others have been telling me about O'Ward. Now I get to see that, yeah, this kid, we're not claiming he's the next world champion. We're just saying we're seeing the indicators that this kid's working with some pretty special stuff. An Indy Lights championship would indicate that you have the potential there, but it's pretty amazing when you get to see someone then take that talent and first time out have a Scott Dixon, a Will Power, a Mike Hull, some other folks just speaking very flowery and complimentary words about you, even as a rookie. So I know you took those things to heart and were very thankful and thank them for saying such things too. It's another thing I appreciate is that you're not coming in here with a huge ego and telling everybody I'm just going to kick everyone's ass. Everyone should retire because I'm going to beat you all right now. You also, I think, have come in with a full sense of appreciation for those you're going up against and for those who've treated you with respect as well.
Yeah, you know, how you mentioned, you know, about Scott Dixon, and I was, maybe not surprised is the right word, but it was very humbling to hear the nice things that Will Power said about me, Scott Dixon, Hunter Ray, Newgarden, and everybody that came up to me and said something. That meant a lot to me because I've been watching them for so many years, and for someone with such, you know, with a name with such prestige and with so much history, it's really cool for them, you know, to see that you're trying to, you know, obviously to compete against them, but they recognize the hard work because they've been through it. And I thought that was to me personally, that was very special. And I know Scott Dixon mentioned a good amount of times, you know, there's talent, and he did a very good job. And I don't know how to appreciate him because I don't have his phone number or anything because I just met him. But
I'll get you taken care of there when we're done here.
He was to me, he's been, I think, he's been the one that I followed the most, and basically like an idol. And for him to say that, I thought that was, you know, very, very, very cool. I think it's, you know, I told my team when I went out on track for first practice, there was a handful that literally just, I was on track in a hot lap or whatever. They came out of the pits. They just saw I was a rookie. They didn't care, and they just blocked me the whole way. And when Scott Dixon, when I was on track or whatever, and he just came out of the pits, or he was, you know, going slow in front, he was the first one to go to the side and respected that. And I went on and I went on the radio and I said, that's why he's a champion, because you know that that was a world-class act. And I obviously, when I saw that, I said, you know, that's why he's what he is now, you know.
Let me raise one more topic before we jump into questions. I haven't seen this happen in a while, and I'm just sharing things with you, dear listeners, that, you know, we get to see from inside the sport that you might not get to see from outside. We sit in or listen to 1 million press conferences a year. I would say that if we're lucky, 20% of them are interesting or engaging. Most of them are not, and that's not being mean or critical. It's just, you know, so many of them happen with so many different drivers or team owners, you name it. While it's a function of the sport, yeah, you kind of tune them out after a while. So they bring Pato in after finishing 9th on his IndyCar debut, and, you know, everyone, I think, had just heard from Ryan Hunter-Reay, who won the race. Folks were waiting for Scott Dixon. You know, the race had been over for a while, so you got a packed press conference room and folks waiting for the champion, and in comes this kid that, again, most people don't know. And you held that audience of hardened, bitter, embattled, tired, whatever it is, members of the media. I haven't heard folks laugh more or applaud or seen them smile or just react from whether it was just telling a funny story or seeing the raw emotion. It was really neat to see folks who had known your name maybe, but haven't really heard from you in depth, to see a group of people like myself who by and large just tune out most press conferences, see so many perk up and go, holy cow, this kid's bringing a lot of fun and character. I need to sit up and listen. And then we're laughing, we're just turning and looking at each other like, wow, this is really cool. And then you did one thing too, which I need to compliment you on. Obviously, as someone who speaks both Spanish and English, we're fortunate to have more of the Spanish-speaking media coming to follow what you're doing. 95% of the questions you got in the press conference were in English, and when one of the Spanish-speaking reporters asked you a question in Spanish, you answered it in Spanish, and rather than finishing that and taking the next question in English, you repeated the question in English to the English-speaking media and repeated your answer to the question in English. And again, it's just one of those little things where you go, damn, this kid gets it. This kid gets it. So I don't know if someone told you to do that or if it's coming natural or not, but I would say in terms of press conferences, even with Dixon and Hunter and whatever, you definitely won that one yesterday, kid.
No, thanks, man. I think that, that's what it's all about. Everybody at the race weekends, we're all there to have fun. We're all there to enjoy. We're not just there to, sometimes just be, maybe be a little stressed when you're not on pace or whatever. But I think it's all about having fun. And I've really learned how to enjoy myself in doing what I love to do. I've been working for it, for so long. And I said, you know what? If someone doesn't enjoy it, then what are you doing it for? And I think that's one of the key things that, to me, have been some of the best things that I've learned how to do, because it's all about enjoying it, and it's all about talking with people, meeting new people, and I've gotten to meet so many people, and I've learned so many things from every single one that that it just stays in your head. You put it into your memory bank, and then you have it there for the rest of your life. And it could be or good or bad, but you learn a lot of things, and that's what we're in the game for. We're there to have fun. We're there to chat with people that have the same passion as you, even if it's not as a driver, but maybe as a team owner, as an engineer, as a journalist, and we're all there to win. So it's like, and we travel to very different places in the United States, and it's like it's a circus, and we are the clowns,
Ah. That just reminds me I need to get my red nose and white face paint, and I would look like a really scary... Maybe the Insane Clown Posse is more like what we are like going from town to town. All right, my man. Well, let's jump into some questions here. First one in comes from Horatio Frey. This says, congratulations, Pato, on your outing. Any concern that you might have set the bar too high and set expectations too high going forward?
Well, thank you. I told my dad that I was like, I think I set the bar pretty high for myself. But I'm here to win. I know they've been in this for a long time. But I don't want to. What I didn't want to be, I didn't want to, get to the category and then be in the back. That's usually the story. Always, whenever some rookie comes up or whatever, I don't want to be in the back. I like to be in the front, and I like to be, one of the top names that is fighting for wins, fighting for podiums, fighting for championships. Obviously, in my first race, it's a little hard to do that with some of the best drivers in the world. But like I mentioned, I learned a lot, and I'm ready to fight next year if I get that chance.
Let's go next to Jameen Tuttle. It says, great run on Sunday, Pato. Was your debut easier or harder than you expected, or did it play out like you thought it would?
I feel like, even if I was eyes looking in, I think I made something really, really, really hard look a little bit easier than what it is. But it was very difficult. It was not easy for me to to get into the Fast Six. It was not easy for me to make my way from 18th to 9th. It was nothing close to easy, but it's it was really difficult, man. It was very difficult. I really, really had to dig in and dig through to pass everybody and to put something, down some good lap times, and to make my way back up, because everybody has been racing the car for the whole year, and I don't really have as much knowledge as they do. So I had to play catch up in a very fast way in learning a lot of things in the first 30, 40 laps. But I think I got it down in the end of the race.
And you raise a great point there of making things look easier than they were, and that is one of the traits that we associate with many of the best race car drivers in whatever category. So you're able to do that your first time out. Obviously the goal will be second time and third time, and if that can become a habit, that would be a pretty amazing thing. I think a lot of folks will start following and tracking. Got another question here, follow-up right after as well, from Mr. and or Mrs. Tuttle. This is Pato. Even if you and Colton Herta are teammates next year, will you still talk smack every time you beat him on track? I love it.
Would I talk smack? Have I ever talked smack to him?
I don't know, but I think there's, two young kids seem to like one another, get along well. I mean, if you and I were teammates at the same age and I beat you, I'd be giving you the business every time. I'd be flipping you off when I was passing you whenever I could. I mean, come on, you got to live your life.
No, I mean, this year I was very grateful to have Colton as a teammate, because he's obviously very good, and he pushed me to my limits, and I pushed him to his limits. And whenever one of us is having trouble, I always helped him. And if I had a question, he would help me. And I think if we have a chance to be teammates again in IndyCar, we will now be, now we are teammates that will help each other, because we're trying to help a team as well. Not just, I think in Indy Lights it's a little different, because you're all competing for something that's going to catapult you to the star category. But now, as as we're drivers in IndyCar, I feel like the help is more, and if one of us does well, the other one will be proud of one another. Colton was very proud of what I got to accomplish this weekend, and he told me, and I've told him whenever I'm proud of him as well. It's not like we're rivals. We're friends that race each other really hard, but we both want to succeed, and I would really enjoy having him as a teammate.
Yeah, absolutely. Got a question here on similar theme, but more limited to last weekend. Comes in from Cale Peister. He says, what do you think was the cause of the discrepancy in performance between the two Harding cars? Did you and Colton get a chance to compare notes on that end? I mean, he was able to show some of his capabilities, but not as much as you were able to. And, I think you and I would both agree, in equal cars, the two of you are going to be within, a millionth of one another on the stopwatch, but didn't pan out that way exactly on your both of your debuts. Any idea if and where there might have been some greater challenges on his side than yours?
Both cars were identical. Not one was better. They were both identical, and I think, maybe I just got the hang of it maybe a little quicker than he did. I think on the red tire, I was very strong. But we're both learning, and he was learning as well. He's also a little younger than me. But I don't think you would expect him to. I don't think you'll expect to see him in the back. If he gets that full season ride, he's gonna learn, and he's gonna progress quickly, because he's a good driver. I've been against him, and maybe some tracks he's quicker, some tracks I'm quicker. in this time, it looks like I got the hang of it and got more comfortable than he did. But I think you'll see us pretty close to each other, in the future if we both get that chance to do the next good amount of years in IndyCar. I think it's just one of us maybe got comfortable or got the hang of it a little quicker. I don't think one is better than the other. I mean, the cars were identical.
Yeah, no, understood. We've got a lot over the weekend on social media from folks, and Tom Cottle has asked it here. Did Harding have different dampers for this weekend? Just curious. And without getting too heavily into Andretti's business, we can say that in this Andretti Junior team working with Harding Racing, there were some definite technical upgrades, as you would expect. It would be silly to have the quality of an Andretti Autosport and their ridiculous engineering talent as well, and all that they've helped made good on their 4 primary Andretti Autosport cars, not have some sort of filter down effect on working with their 2 Indy Lights drivers making their IndyCar debut, Tom. So yeah, you can definitely say that the number 8 and the number 88 Chevys were definitely sharper tools than maybe they had been earlier in the year. All right, let's get to our last couple of questions here, my man. Greg Liver's Edge says, what else is on Pato's schedule this year? Any sports car outings or other drives scheduled you can tell us about?
I do not. I really want to do Petit Le Mans at DPI. That'd be pretty cool, but I do not have anything at the moment. Well,
I need to get you a few more phone numbers, because that kind of needs to happen there. Because that was the one race that escaped you last year, right? I mean, you won, 9 out of 10 races or something silly?
Exiting the pits. Yeah, we got hit.
That's the one you need, and then you would have won on every track where IMSA's prototypes compete. That'd be pretty amazing. That'd be a nice little... At 19, that'd be kind of crazy. Let's see. Greg also says, I imagine a lot of people came up to Pato after the race to congratulate you on a job well done. Who made you the most starstruck, or who meant the most to you personally?
From the people that came up to me?
Yeah, or maybe even reached out on social media, who were you like, wow, that's cool?
I think when Scott Dixon came up to me, he was also the first one and only one to come up to me the first day, and he came and said, "Hey, congratulations and welcome to the series."
Wow.
And then the day after, he shook my hand like 2 or 3 times, and I was like, "Oh my God, did I just shake his hand?"
That is so awesome. And the funny thing is about Dixie is he's the most normal alien in the world. Like, the guy's talent level, it is seriously from like the moon, Jupiter. I don't know where it comes from. It's just not even human. But as a person, he's just, I've said that for many years. Whenever there's a problem, whenever a driver gets hurt, anytime there's anything that involves a big heart and a real human response, Dixie's usually the first one there. How can I help? What can I do? And, it's not a surprise that the whatever he was, 99 or 2000, or shoot, I don't even know, 2001, I'm forgetting the year, but Indy Lights champ came up to, give lots of love to the new Indy Lights champ. So that is pretty cool to hear. Let's see. Let me find one more. Oh, we got a tweet that came in from Amy Haley saying, "Hello, I'm waiting for you here at Diff Girls." So
I saw that.
Huh? You probably replied, you pervert. So don't spend all that big IndyCar prize money.
Cutie.
Hey. We got a question here from Carlos Villalobos on Twitter, which you might need to read because although I've grown up in California, I actually took French in high school instead of Spanish, which is really stupid. So you might have to take Carlos's question here on Twitter for us and answer it in Spanish.
Let me go to it. Give me 1 second. Okay.
No worries.
Carlos Villalobos, where you at, boy? Okay. Para Patricio, ¿cuál es la diferencia más grande con un Indy Lights? ¿La potencia del motor o los frenos? He said, what is the biggest difference with an Indy Lights? The power or the brakes? Honestly, if I would say something, I think the brakes are pretty savage on the IndyCar. The thing really stops. So yeah, I think that would be the biggest difference. Second difference, I think, would be just the tire and the aero that the IndyCar has. It's a lot more than the Indy Lights.
How proud were you, by the way, of, after the race, seeing how darn well your engineer Mark did throughout the weekend, making his IndyCar engineering debut? And, I know Jessica Mace, for example, she's been on a couple of Indy 500 pit crews before, but in addition to winning the Lights Championship with you, her kind of big team debut, you could say as well. I'm guessing you got out of the car and were like, man, this is not just cool for me, but this is really cool for my Indy Lights Championship winning people who also starred this weekend.
I am very proud of him because he came in as a rookie to the Indy Lights just like I did. And it was really cool to have familiar faces on my car and working with me, because I think the chemistry me and Mark started with is very good, and he knows what I like in a car. And we worked very well. So I'm very proud on what we got to accomplish this weekend. It was something unheard of, I think. I think we were really, really strong. We were right on pace. I think if I just had a little bit more knowledge in the race, I could have done something pretty good. Maybe a podium would have been in hand. But that's why we learn, and that's why it's called a debut.
Absolutely. And this, although we're recording this on Monday the 17th, this isn't going to go up until Wednesday because our pal Katie Hargitt from NBCSN isn't going to be free until then. That kind of lines up the question here from Rolando Saka, who says, after an outstanding performance, when will we see an announcement for a well-deserved full-time season for Pato? Well, again, hopefully by the time you're listening to this, Rolando, you might have read about some great stuff that answers your question. And just to be safe, we're not going to go into it here. But I can tell you that Sonoma Raceway will not be the first and only race of young Mr. O'Ward's career, and that is pretty darn awesome. Let's see, we got one or two more. The first one is actually just a nice comment coming in from Harrison Riley. He said, don't have a question, but wanted to thank you all for the wonderful live podcast on Sunday afternoon. The group was a delight, and I thought that was a lot of fun, Pato, and thanks for coming out and taking part with you, Jerry Hildebrand, Sonoma Raceway CEO Steve Page, IndyCar competition president Jay Fry, and then the mayor of Hinchtown showed up about halfway through, and I loved how you all were sitting in the high chairs, and he got kind of the little kid's chair, and just got stuck sitting at the end, and sat down and said, I'm a big boy. So that was a lot of fun, and I think folks enjoyed having you there. And let's see, we'll take the last question here, which is a little bit of a comment too, but love to get your thoughts. This comes in from Lance Snyder, who says, with what appears to be a bumper field for next year with new competitors, either those with full or part-time rides, alongside the veterans, is this the brightest IndyCar will have looked in many years? To be really honest, Lance, when I am staring at what we could have in 2019 with all of the amazing veterans that are signed and will be back, Dixon, Rossi, Power, Hunter-Ray, Newgarden, Pagenaud, Bourdais, Graham Rahal, Marco Andretti, Hinch. We don't know who's going to partner with Hinch next year. We're not. It would be a big surprise if Wickens was ready to resume racing activities by the time we kick off early next year. Even Robert said in the video, I'm sure you saw the video that he posted as well, Pato, which was so amazing, that it's going to be a long road. So don't know who's going to partner with Hinch, but we'll see who will be there. But on down the line, Sato, Piggott, Veach, Kanaan, so on and so forth. There's a lot of veterans, champions, Indy 500 winners, also young talent, and some of the good things we expect to hear regarding you and Colton. Jordan King did a hell of a job, qualified last, improved, I think, 13 positions or something like that, drove to the front. There's a ton of young talent trying to get in or trying to stay in. Pietro Fittipaldi had a good day. I think Santino Ferrucci put in a couple of good races here to close the season. Jack Harvey is finding his feet, etc., etc. Old talent, new talent, middle-aged talent. Lance, I agree. I think what we have coming next year and then for many years to follow, I think we're going to be in a pretty darned amazing place. What about from your perspective, Pato? Are you excited for the level of ferocity and talent that you're going to have to go up against as the new Indy Lights champ?
I'm beyond excited because a win would actually mean a win, you know? I think there's nothing more satisfying than to know that you're racing against some of the best people in the world, and when you get to get a victory or, you know, beat them, I think that is just so much more satisfying than if there's just one, you know?
Absolutely. Hey, man, really, really happy for you, proud of the performance you and the team put in, and thank you for giving existing fans, new fans, old fans, some young blood to root for next year as you come in, and for what I think is going to be a pretty amazing future. But you're already contributing a heck of a lot as a guy who's brand new to IndyCar, and that's pretty darn cool as well. So hopefully, well, I'm sure we'll have you on more than once during the off season, but just really cool to see someone have a dream and then go out and live the heck out of it on their IndyCar debut.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me, and everybody that listens to this, thank you for the support as always. It means the world to me.
All right, go get another massage or whatever you're doing, you pervert.
All right, big boy. Later.
Katie Hargitt, you and the NBCSN team were plenty busy last weekend trying to stay on top of about 432 different plot lines and potential outcomes at Sonoma Raceway. You've had a couple of days to soak in what went down. What stands out from that late Sunday race where a champion was crowned, a young hopeful came close but struggled from the outset, and one of the veterans was able to close his season on a high note?
Yeah, I mean, it was an exciting race to go out in Sonoma, not only the last race in Sonoma, but for the time being, but the last race of 2018. And within those first few laps, when I saw Alexander get into the back of Marco, my heart just sank. I really wanted to see a good battle all the way until the end and be questioning on the last lap who was going to be the champion. But I think Alex did an incredible job of coming back through the field, and it just is a testament to everything he's done this season, and really his ability to come back was incredible. And like you said, good to see Ryan in victory lane for the second time this season. I think that was probably a bright spot for Andretti when their hearts were just breaking for Alexander, and Ryan is one of the most gracious winners. If you listen to his victory lane interview, the very first thing out of his mouth was, happy birthday to Becky, and Robbie, this one's for you. So, and speaking of Robbie, you know, right before the race started, he put out a video of himself, and he's in rehab now, and that video was just good to see him, and I'm sure comforting for all the fans to hear from him.
Yeah, I think for many of us, just being able to see Robbie and hear from him, it meant the world, and great recognition on his part as well, feeling and receiving all of the care from tens and, I don't know how many, a lot of thousands of people, an incredible amount of people, knowing that going into the off-season without hearing from him would have had folks worried even more. So I think also just great recognition from him to take a moment and say hello, and I think really lift a lot of spirits, even though many of us had done our best to push that down so we can focus on our jobs. That was just one of the absolute highlights of the day. So, Katie, I'm not a big fan of deserved and saying that someone deserved to win, but I will.
Really?
Yeah, but I will I will make a bit of a rare exception here in my own parlance, because when I think of Hunter-Reay in his victory, as I wrote not too long ago, he's had the best worst season of his career. And looking at the victory for him to close the season, again, I don't like deserved, because no one person is more deserving than the others, but boy, for me at least, we got pretty close. I mean, that's a guy to be able to go out on a high, have all of his sponsors happy and fully engaged. There was just something that felt incredibly right about him winning, maybe compared to some others who've had better years. Do you think I'm in the general frame of correctness, or am I off base?
Oh, for sure. And it's funny because I've, over the last few seasons, covered Ryan quite a bit, and just feel like, I connect with all the drivers, but connect well with Ryan mostly because I enjoy talking to him about his sons, and who doesn't love to talk about their kids. So we talk, at the track, and just kind of looking back on his seasons, and he has been so fast. I mean, you look at Pocono for the last few years, where he's come from the back to the front multiple times in almost every race. Had that vicious crash there last year and still performed when he could barely even get in the car. But it's been so good to see him back in a championship hunt this year. I think for the first time in 4 years, right, Marshall? Yeah,
I mean, honestly, this is the best, if we're just talking purely championship contention. This, to my recollection, is about the best that he's really had. I'm not saying he hasn't, been mathematically eligible for a championship.
Well, I don't think he has been. Since his championship, I don't think he's been mathematically eligible.
Yeah, fair enough. I know that at least his fourth place, what ended up being fourth place, thanks to that final victory here, it is his best championship outcome since he won that title in 2012. Right. So, I mean, he's been, for the most part, 6th, 7th, in that frame. Last year was 9th, very uncharacteristic. But, yeah, I mean, this just... Anytime we have some of the older stars who are still reminding the young punks that, hey, we're not going to make it easy on you, and then we've got a 38-year-old champ, I like that. I like the dynamic of the old lines and young lines pawing at each other, and this was the season.
It's funny you say that, because something that we talked a lot about on the NBC side this season was just kind of how similar Alex and Scott really are. I mean, if you think about it, they're both very quiet personalities. I mean, Alex has come out of his shell a little bit this year, but generally both very quiet people, introverted, I guess you could say, but incredibly impressive to watch on track, but at the same time kind of quiet, besides Alex's really bold moves, when he wins, he just kind of does it quietly. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I actually had someone else float that over the weekend, and actually completely disagreed. And
wow.
Yeah, and it's maybe because I've known Alex a little bit better, or I don't know, I'm not claiming he and I are friends, but just known him for a few years before he came over to IndyCar, and I've known Dixie for a good while, and I actually can't think of two people who are less alike, both behind the steering wheel and personality-wise. But keep in mind, that's knowing the folks behind or outside of the cockpit as well. And so for what folks see in an interview or get a feeling for in a written story might be a little bit different. But again, it's not as if my opinion's right or wrong. It's just, I can't...
They're called opinions for a reason.
Yes, and I'm told everybody has at least one. But I would say, and have been saying for a little bit now, that whenever Dixie decides to hang it up, he is absolutely the successor to him. I mean, Rossi is going to be Scott Dixon for the next 10 or 15 years whenever, Dixie is basically done. So, yeah, just that holy cow, stomp the field, do amazing things, and do it in a just almost a little bit of a black magic way. I don't know if mysterious is a way to put it, but there are some drivers you can look at, see their performances, and go, okay, I understand all of it. there's still a little touch of, I'm not sure how these guys conjure these things, but maybe that adds to the intrigue a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we were asked to pick out a highlight of the season so far, and all the reporters were asked to do that on the NBC side, and my highlight was Alex's insane passes, mainly at Indy. So I love watching him, and I can't wait to see what he does in the next, 20-plus years of his career, too.
He's only 3 years in. That's the scary part. That's the truly scary part. And there's so much more to grow and learn. So, yeah, I think there's going to be a passing of the baton here at some point in time. One of the cool things as well, Katie, was right after the race, celebrations in Dixon's pit box, and you've got the entire pit crew, you've got the engineering staff, strategists, you name it, all there huddling around the car, taking photos, congratulating Dixie and congratulating one another. And then we see the champions who have just passed that distinction over to Ganassi walk down. And whether it was John Buslog from Team Penske or Ron Brzezinski, their technical director, there are a heck of a lot of people from Team Penske having, just say surrendered the championship with Joseph Newgarden having won it last year, walking down and congratulating the Ganassi team for, I guess you could either say taking it from them, but I just thought it was a really classy move. They could have pouted or sulked or just packed up and gone home, and instead a number of Team Penske's senior folks came down to say genuinely, congratulations, amazing job this year. I love that kind of camaraderie.
I mean, how could you not just have the utmost respect for everything, but also this year? We call it like the miracle on dirt from Portland when he made it through that wreck. That was amazing just in itself. But everything he's done this year, he's just finished the races, been consistent. And I think, throughout the paddock, there is just the utmost respect for Scott, because not only is he a good driver, but he's a good guy, and he would have done the exact same thing had the shoe been on the other foot. And, covering Joseph all weekend, kind of talking to him throughout the 3 days that we were in Sonoma. And remember, he had food poisoning on Friday.
Yep.
I mean, he was so sick. When he got out of the car, Marshall, his face was, he's already a pretty pale guy, but he was as white as a ghost, and you could just tell that he did not feel well. And then talking to him Saturday, going into qualifying, he was feeling a lot better and thought, I can have a pole car. And, that didn't end up happening. But he also said, I know I'm not going to win the championship. They came into the weekend 87 points out, and basically Dixon and Alex both were going to have to not finish the race. They were going to have to finish 23rd and 24th for Joseph to even have a shot at it. And based on Dixon's season, we knew that was not going to happen. So, I'm not surprised at all to hear something like that, because we have such a good paddock in general. All the guys are so respectful of each other, so that's good to hear.
Let's jump into listener questions, and we have some, I'm guessing maybe the mix is 50-50 of those with race and event-related questions, and the other half just wanting to ask you questions, since this is your...
Oh, boy.
Although this actually isn't the first time you've been on the podcast, but folks wouldn't know that because I haven't published the first
secret
one we did. Well, I'll be getting that series ready to go, but this is your first time on the Week in IndyCar, and hopefully not the last. But we've got let me put a couple of questions together here that are similar. Zachary Campbell says, Katie, how did your background as a driver influence you once you switch gears into race reporting? And then we have a similar question from Brian Cohn asking, how tough was giving up driving for your broadcast career, and how did you get started in broadcasting?
So my broadcasting career came about because I was in college and my dad was being mean and made me choose going to college or driving. And let's just say I was no Scott Dixon, so I knew that my future was probably not in driving. I liked it. I enjoy the competitive aspect of it. I enjoy adrenaline rushes. so being at Ball State, where, the David Letterman School of Communications, I thought, okay, well, if I can't race for a living, why not talk about it? That sounds fun. So I started reporting for USAC. I got out of the driver's seat in USAC Midgets and went to the USAC officials and said, hey, let's do so, social media was just kicking off at the time. So I thought, hey, let's do some social media interviews, let fans get to know these drivers better. So I started doing that for USAC, and that snowballed into IndyCar Radio, which snowballed into a quick stint in local news, and then back to IndyCar with NBCSN.
Katie, we'll stick with one more question about you before we jump into some more related to the race and whatnot. This one comes in from Diane Chenot, who asks, Katie, how do you prepare for race day?
Oh, Diane, I study. I'll use between Portland and Sonoma for an example. In Portland, when I get home from Portland, I will rewatch that race that we just came from, just to make sure I'm keeping everything straight. I only cover 7 to 8 drivers specifically during the race, but I like to know how everybody else's day unfolded as well. And then I will watch Sonoma from last year, so Sonoma 2017, just to make sure that, again, I know all the overarching storylines, tire strategy, fuel strategy, you name it, anything that comes up during a race. And then we also have this really awesome guy on staff at NBC named Russ Thompson.
Yes, Russ.
And he is our statistician, and we have this handy notebook called a Russopedia because Russ is the encyclopedia of IndyCar stats. I've never seen anything like it. It's amazing and so helpful because I don't think that numbers tell the story, but they can certainly help tell the story. So, for example, generally speaking, Sonoma is one of Simon Pagenaud's best racetracks. He's won 2016 and 2017, and he's had a really tough year. So how can those numbers help tell the story of Simon's weekend unfolding? So there are many things that I do, and most recently, or this year, I actually got an iPad, which has been a total game changer for me because then I have a tab for every driver and I can keep running notes from the entire season. And that has been extremely helpful for me just to know, as soon as something happens in somebody's race, wow, so Spencer Pigot was running really well. For example, I'm just making something up, but, Spencer Pigot was running really well and then all of a sudden he had a mechanical issue. Well, a 21st finishing position doesn't reflect that. He was really fast there. So, what happened to his day or something like that. So that's been a total game changer for me this season and so helpful.
Yeah, and it's been fun watching you. If I happen upon a driver I want to ask a question to and you're there, beat me to the punch. It's been fun watching you scribble notes on your iPad while they're talking, and the whole time I'm like, wow, my brain doesn't work that fast to process things. She's kind of impressive.
Man, shorthand is your biggest friend when taking notes on drivers. But yeah, that has been so helpful because I can instantly, scribble notes and then instantly go type them out, and it just makes the whole process so much faster and easier. I highly recommend it.
Well, since you threw the word short out there, I guess that'll lead us to the very first question, which came in from Eric Harkrader, who says, Katie, who's taller, you or Zach Veach?
Zach Veach. For sure, right? You've seen us, Marshall. Zach Veach is taller, for sure.
Yeah, but he's just so kind of, he looks like a little doll. You just want to position his arms and legs like a race car driver and, do something like that.
Did you just call Zach Veach race car driver Ken?
I did. And we're not even talking about whether he's smooth down there. We're just saying that, and also I mentioned this in my little cold open, but yeah, so I love Zach and him being a great, fun guy who honored a challenge that he placed here in the podcast a couple weeks ago about running that silly sticker on his helmet of me dressed like a superhero carrying our cat Rocky around in a pink basket. I'll also say that I don't think he will ever accept a challenge like that again because he did not have a very good day at Sonoma. So I guess I take
it was your fault.
100%. Clearly. I mean, there's no other...
At least you're taking the blame. It's nice of you to step up like that.
There's no other way to take this. It's purely, without me, he would have had a great day. So, 100%.
But he's got lots to be proud of this season. I mean, that kid killed it all year.
Yeah, well, just imagine what he is going to be like in year 2, in year 3. I mean, he made a lot of little mistakes this year, as you would expect from a rookie. But even that being said, he was still so impressive, and there's still a lot of upside to come from good old Zach Veach. All right, got a couple of questions here, Katie, which we can dig into a little bit more on the opinion-y side.
Oh boy.
Or just maybe information dissemination. We got 2 from Bobby Rooney. First one says, Marshall, one thing I haven't heard anything about is the leader circle related to Robert Wickens' number 6 car. He said a car is required to run every race to get the payout, right? Et cetera, et cetera. The car obviously didn't run at Gateway right after Robbie's big crash. And he said, I imagine an exception was made. How's this, Bobby? And I don't want to speak for the series. It's their money to spend. But yes, there are indeed contracts. It's basically leader circle money. You could call it appearance money almost. It is an equal distribution of prize funds, a little more than $1 million for each full-time entry. It's also money owned by the series / Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So while they do have contracts, and there are expectations for every team with a contract to show up for every round, there's always been a heavy amount of understanding, Katie, that, hey, if this team lost a sponsor with 2 races to go, or whatever the circumstances might be, if something outside of their control has kept them from being able to fulfill every single, letter of the contract, I haven't really seen the IndyCar Series take a negative approach and say, nope, you're off the leader circle list for next year. So that's another thing where I have to give them credit for recognizing that teams try, but sometimes exceptional circumstances, that's something to accept and not penalize them for.
Well, and something that I want to just point out about Robbie is just how amazing he was for the series. He brought a lot of attention to the series, and everything that both he and James Hinchcliffe do week in and week out for the series, they are some of the greatest spokesmen. So I think that the series would definitely take that into account when looking at these situations too, because he's just been such a great advocate for coming over and doing well.
Another thing here from Bobby wanting to get our thoughts about the season finale in general. This is an interesting one. Everyone always wants to avoid contact or influencing the outcome, which is good, but do you feel it goes overboard and is not representative of a typical race? He said, for example, Power did not even try to get close to Dixon for second. Kanaan literally moved over and waved Rossi past for 9th place and said neither would ever do that in a regular race. At what point does not wanting to influence the title actually go too far and influence the title a little bit too much? What are your thoughts there?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, I guess I hadn't thought about it in that perspective. I did think it was weird that Tony waved Alex by just because he and Dixon are such good friends and former teammates. But I also think that had Alex had a chance to get close to Dixon, we could have seen the most epic battle of the season. So I can see both sides of it.
Yeah, and I will say that, Bobby, that we saw that in some cases, not every. We saw Jordan King, for example, throw his car down the inside of Rossi into the final corner and kind of bump him out of the way at one point. And, not everybody was trying to look at the bigger picture. Some, like Jordan, in fair play, realized, hey, I qualified last. I can't leave the finale without a contract with a team by letting them think I'm just a pushover. So I guess not everyone was on that plan, but at the same time, if you think about a Kanaan who knows he has nothing to gain, even if anything short of a win was going to be somewhat meaningless for TK and the Foyt team, Power, I would maybe argue, if he could have gotten to Dixon, he would have, and gotten past him. I've never known Will to not attack And I'd also say that had Rossi been able to get to the back of Dixon's car, we saw him trying to catch up to Hunter Ray. I also don't know if we saw Scott at complete maximum attack himself, meaning...
No, not at all.
Could he have drawn away easily? And even when there was a little bit of pressure, we saw in the final laps, last maybe 10 or 15 laps, Katie, Rossi was driving like a madman, and from a lap time standpoint, Dixie was matching him. You know, they might have been up or down a tenth or two, depending on traffic, but they were going blow for blow, and Dixie at least was making sure that that lead was not being drawn down. So, but I hear your point, Bobby. I mean, you want to see things play out naturally. At the same time, I maybe also appreciate there's some good citizens on track as well that realize, hey, you know, I don't want to be the storyline for, fighting too hard or maybe making things too easy. Let's see. Here's another one that's interesting, and Nathan, I actually have asked this question. Nathan DeRover, who always sends in great questions, Katie, said, was Zach Brown's tenure at McLaren, and therefore McLaren's involvement in IndyCar, tenuous at best? Is it possible that Zach will bring Fernando Alonso over under his United Autosports banner? That being the team that Zach owns directly. He said, United Autosports and Andretti are already merged in the Australian Supercar Series with the Walkinshaw team, so it seems like a natural fit with Brown perhaps even buying into Andretti's team. I asked him about that probably 6 weeks ago, Nathan, and he said no. Wasn't something he thought about, and really the only way that could be possible, I think his phrasing was, if it was like Christmas, with sponsorship money just, stacked beneath the tree for him to try and use Fernando through United Autosports instead of McLaren. So knowing Zach, things are constantly on the move. So who knows, in the 6 weeks since we covered that, Katie, maybe that's changed. I don't know. But at least since we last spoke, that was definitely a no. Hey, here's a question I think you might be keen to answer. This one comes in from Chris G. It says, for Katie, can she talk about her Fuel the Female initiative and what her plans are for 2019 with it?
That's a great question. So that is hopefully going to be my full-time job for these next few months, so I can really concentrate on it, because it's really hard to work several full-time jobs at the same time and travel and, just keep your sanity. So anyway, the hope for that is that by the end of this winter, I will hopefully have in place some sort of education program, and I'm working with a few partners right now to try and develop that. It's not something that we're ready to announce just quite yet, but we've got lots of side projects going on with it as well. For example, Marshall, you know that Kate Gunlack, who is the most recent championship winning assistant engineer at Chip Ganassi Racing, will be speaking to a group of 100 high school girls coming up in October, and that's an event in partnership with the American Heart Association. So we're getting our foot in the door, so to speak, with many organizations, and just trying to form some partnerships that can be beneficial down the road so that we can spread the message as wide as possible. So for now, stay tuned to social media.
Absolutely, and also Danielle Shepard, who is part of the team as data engineer. And this isn't a rant. I'm going to keep this super short because we only have about 10 or 12 minutes before you need to hop on a flight. But had some interesting responses on social media. There's one person in particular who thought that there was some sort of odd motivation to write a story, for me to write a story about Kate and Danielle this is truly a groundbreaking thing of these two women winning an IndyCar championship as engineers. And some of the follow-up comments about, well, maybe some feminist outlets will pick up on this story and maybe it'll be some value for them. Was it one of your most clickable stories? Yeah, it probably ended up gaining some great traction from normal outlets. Well, it's had about 1,000 shares right now, which is great. But I guess my takeaway from that is, why would two women making history as the first women to win IndyCar championships as engineers, why would that be something that feminist outlets, whatever that is, by the way, feminist outlets would pick up? Why would that not be something that just men say, hey, that's awesome, that's the way the world should be, along with women saying that. I think, if anything, in this day and age, it should just be a human thing where we go, cool, another barrier broken, let's keep breaking them until there are no more left to break.
And why can't we just acknowledge that another person has done something really cool? I mean, man, woman, whatever, it doesn't matter. When someone accomplishes a lifelong goal, say congratulations and move on. You know what I mean? I don't know why people have to tear others down.
I think we're both standing on our little soapbox and feeling good about ourselves right now,
Yes.
So there you go.
Pat myself on the back.
All right, Craig Tomastic asks, Katie, what was your favorite news story or special interest piece from the season that you reported on or were a direct part of, and why?
Special interest piece. I guess I'm not sure where to go with that one.
Why do Pruett and Miller still have jobs? That was a really good one, which we don't have answers to, so we appreciated that one.
Was that a story?
It's kind of an ongoing thing, for sure. How do these guys keep getting employed? But I guess of all the variety of things you've done this year as part of the NBCSN team, are there any interviews you've done that stood out like, wow, that was really cool, or felt like folks really had a positive reaction to?
Yeah, so we have a social media segment called Rapid Fire. It's on the NBC app and on the NBC Sports website, and that's one of my favorite things to do all weekend long, because it really gives me a chance to get the guys out of their shell, and we don't necessarily talk racing. We talk life and fun things about them, fun facts about them. So this will be the third season that we've done Rapid Fire, and every season I've done a push-up contest with Tony Kanaan, because he did push-ups in Victory Lane when he won in Sonoma, right? So he did, his car number at the time was 10, so he did 10 push-ups and then one-handed push-up. And if I wasn't in the racing industry, I've said this before, I would be in the fitness industry. I love to work out. And so it has been my goal to finally do a one-handed push-up with Tony Kanaan. So we attempted that again this past weekend in Sonoma, and I'll just if you're wanting to check it out and see how it went, just go on the NBC Sports website and search it. Search Rapid Fire with Katie Hargitt, and you'll find it. Yeah, you're welcome for the laugh in advance.
I love it. So I had one really cool thing happen last weekend, Katie, which was a bit of a surprise. So Thursday, got to the paddock, and the Ganassi team happened to be the first one in the very first garage. And Mike Hull waved me over and said, "Hey, got something for you." I'm like, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." A guy that we both follow on social media and follows us, named Tad Tinney. He said, "Hey, he gave me 2 wheels for you at Detroit. And we've been carrying them around in the truck all summer long.
Oh, my gosh.
Can we, offload those things and get our space back?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And so Jake, the Ganassi truck driver, went in, grabbed both of them, helped me bring them out to my car, opened up the box, and it's 2 All-American racers, Dan Gurney, IMSA GTP wheels, back from my favorite era in racing. And it's just one of those things, Katie, where,
cool.
I'm not a driver. I'm not, I'm so far out of the spotlight. It's just crazy to think of someone wanting to give me something. And then when it's 2 things from my hero, related to Dan, that's even crazier. So the question here from Jerry Sudduth said, "Marshall, after seeing the photos of the incredible AAR wheels given to you this weekend, what is your holy grail piece of IndyCar memorabilia?" And I don't want to sound like a sap, Jerry, which actually I'm pretty good at, but I don't know if it's specifically IndyCar, but I guess I'd consider it. I got a little card or letter from Dan, I don't know, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, when I wrote something. I don't remember what magazine it was in, but just opened it up and saw the All-American Racers label in the top left. Opened it up, and it's just a card with a photo of Dan in one of his old race cars, but just a card from Dan thanking me, saying he really enjoyed the conversation that we'd had, that he'd forgotten about it, but enjoyed reading the story that I wrote, and just sent me a note to say thank you. And I mean, I almost need to open my own Fort Knox to put that letter in, because it means that much to me coming from my hero. So
yeah, that's awesome.
To ask what my Holy Grail piece of memorabilia is, I already have it. And the Big Eagle sent me a couple more, after that, that still just, they sit there like things, Katie, where you go, I kind of have yet to accept that that's real.
Well, it's not like
too much.
Being out in California the last 2 days, we met some people and said who were in danger when the fires ripped through here. So I said, okay, I've never been in the position to have to grab those 3 most important things. The get to know you type question. If things were burning down, what would you grab? And sounds like that would be what you would grab, Marshall. Yeah.
That it would, I need to get a go bag ready or something like that, and have that in there. But anyways, thanks for asking, Jerry. That was just one of those things where you go, seriously, someone is giving me these. That's awesome. We lead blessed lives. All right, let's get to our last question or two here, Katie, and then you can get to finally fly home. Let's see. Got some good ones here. Kyle Brown, let's go with yours. Asking about Alexander Rossi, says he certainly was impressive this year, 3 wins, 5 podium finishes. However, he also lost points at St. Pete, the second Detroit race, and Sonoma. Hindsight's 20/20, but it seems like the points he gave up might have allowed him to not feel like he had to go from 6th to 1st on lap 1 at Sonoma. Do you think he'd be better served to dial back his aggressiveness a tad next year, or did his aggression gain him positions and points in less obvious ways at other races? That's an interesting one. Katie, did the points gap to Dixie based on some that he lost earlier in the year, you think that caused him to just drive a little bit out of character on lap 1 and run into Marco? Or do you think that's
I don't think he was really being all that aggressive, though. I mean, if you watch the replay, it's not like he was doing some of the crazy bold moves that he pulled earlier in the season, right? Yeah,
I'm with you. And, I would say, Kyle, looking at what makes Rossi, it's also what makes Newgarden. That pass of Pagenaud at Gateway was truly decisive in the championship going his way. Without that, with him saying, well, I'll just sit behind Simon and get good points, I don't think Joseph's our champ. So at least for me, I don't see Rossi making too many crazy high risk, low reward moves, and I would hate to see if he abandons some of that. So I don't think he will. I will admit, though, that did just seem out of character. That contact with Marco.
Remember, he was a little out of character all weekend long. I think that being in his first legitimate championship scenario probably kind of got to him a little bit. We covered it, on each of our shows this weekend, that it was very uncharacteristic of him to, go off the track as many times as he did during practice, or, make some odd moves that we just are not used to seeing with him. So I think now he is well prepared for a championship scenario, and I think the rest of the field better watch out, because now he knows how to handle anything.
Got 2 questions to go, Katie, and I'll take this first one here from Stephen Johns. He says, noticed at Gateway, the Sunoco truck had separate pumps for Honda and Chevy fuel. Are there actual differences between the fuels used by the two, and what would they be? From everything I know, the fuel as supplied is the same, and I'm sure I will be corrected if I'm wrong, but I do know that both manufacturers have separate preferences for lubricants, and there's an actual fuel pump lubricant that gets added. It's basically an additive to the fuel that they find works best to keep the fuel pumps lubricated and happy, knowing that the fuel itself is not always the optimal lubricant. So that's at least what I know. And if I'm wrong, hopefully y'all will tell me, and I will tell everyone I was stupid and give you the right answer next week. Let's go. Final question, and that's from Greg Fetchick, and that's for you, Katie. It says, if you could go back in time which Indy 500 would you have loved to have been there as a pit reporter for?
Man, any of AJ Foyt's wins. If we've ever had a conversation, and I probably at some point said that I'm obsessed with AJ Foyt, always have been. So anything that he has won, I would have wanted to be there to experience in person.
I don't think that's a bad choice at all. I think there are a lot of folks who would go into the old time machine and see SuperTex win, and I might just go back to about 61 and then just relive the next 20 years or so at Indianapolis. So, Katie, I know you got to get, you're just heard the boarding call. Hopefully you're A1 in your group or whatever it is. And, pal, thanks not only for calling in and making time, but thanks for doing a really great job on pit lane this year and everything else you do to help bring the sport to us in a high-quality manner.
Yes, thank you, Marshall. I will hopefully see you soon.
Amen. And with that, I'll talk to you later.